Imagine a man at the end of his life, wrinkled, silent, eyes filled not with wisdom, but with cold resentment. He's not a villain. He's not dangerous in the traditional sense, yet Jung warned us he is a threat. This man is the bitter old man archetype, a shadow form of aging, where instead of becoming a sage, the elder becomes a vessel of spite, regret, and unresolved pain. Carl Jung wasn't merely speaking of a person. He was speaking of a psychic energy, a collective image that lives within the unconscious of every human. Just like the wise old man, the Gandalf, the Dumbledore, this archetype has its darker twin. He doesn't guide, he poisons. And the most terrifying part? He can awaken in anyone, not just the elderly. Jung's warning wasn't about age, it was about evolution, about what happens when a person refuses to integrate their experiences, when life's disappointments are never transcended, only buried. Eventually, that repressed bitterness finds a face. And that face, grim, sarcastic, detached, becomes the bitter old man. You may have met him, a former teacher, a relative, a stranger at a cafe, ranting about how everything's worse today. But here's the truth. This archetype isn't just outside of us. He's a whisper inside, waiting for us to give up on becoming whole. This is the man Jung told us to fear, not because he harms others, but because he dies never knowing who he could have been. Not all who grow old become wise. Some decay inwardly, long before their bodies do. According to Jungian psychology, the shadow is the part of ourselves we repress, deny, or are ashamed of. When ignored over decades, this shadow festers, and by the time we reach old age, if we haven't faced it, it consumes us. The bitter old man is not born in old age. He's built through a lifetime of avoidance, every resentment unspoken, every failure blamed on others, every grudge carried like armor. These are the bricks. The archetype grows in silence, behind the mask of normal life. Then, one day it becomes visible. Sarcasm replaces wonder, contempt replaces curiosity, and the world is seen as something that owes, not teaches. Jung saw this archetype not just as a psychological concept, but as a warning sign for society. Because when bitterness becomes culture, wisdom dies. We stop learning from our elders and start fearing them. We stop aging with grace and start aging with anger. The bitter old man isn't just an individual problem, he's a collective failure to evolve. But there's still hope. If we catch the shadow early, we can change its course. Jung believed that by confronting the shadow, we could transform it. The bitter old man doesn't have to be your future. He can be your teacher if you dare to face him. We often romanticize age as a gateway to enlightenment. The white-haired guru, the gentle grandfather with endless stories. But not all wisdom ages well. Sometimes, knowledge becomes arrogance. Experience curdles into cynicism, and light, if left unguarded, can turn bitter. Carl Jung understood this duality. Every archetype has its shadow. The wise old man is no exception. When life's lessons are twisted by ego, the result is false wisdom, a masquerade of insight used to dominate, not illuminate. The bitter old man speaks in absolutes. People don't change. The world's going to hell. You'll see when you're older. These aren't truths. They're defenses, walls to hide a heart grown cold. But how does the transformation happen? Often it starts subtly. A disappointment, a betrayal, a life that didn't turn out the way it was supposed to. Instead of reflection, there's blame. Instead of forgiveness, there's judgment. And the man who once dreamed of meaning becomes a keeper of grudges. Wisdom becomes a tool of mockery, not healing. This is the real tragedy Jung saw, not that people become bitter, but that they mistake that bitterness for truth. The old man once stood at the gate of wisdom, but he turned back. Not because he couldn't move forward, but because it hurt too much to try. And now he waits in the dark, offering not light but warning. Beneath every bitter man lies a story, a wound so deep it was never allowed to heal. Jung believed that when the ego is wounded and left unattended, it festers like an infected cut. Over time, that infection spreads, contaminating perception, beliefs, and relationships. The bitter old man is not simply angry, he is wounded, and that wound has become his identity. In youth, many of us carry dreams, ambitions, a hunger to conquer life, but the world is not gentle. Betrayal, failure, injustice, they chip away at the psyche. For some, these blows become sources of strength. For others, they become scars of shame. And when the ego, that fragile structure of self, is too damaged to adapt, it retreats into defensiveness. It becomes brittle, cynical, hostile. This is where the bitter old man is born, not in old age, but in the moment of abandonment. When a man feels the world no longer sees him, he stops seeing the world with empathy. He builds armor of sarcasm and nostalgia, claiming things were better back then, not because they were, but because that was the last time he felt powerful. Jung taught us that to heal this archetype, we must go beyond the persona and reach the core injury. We must confront the question, where did I stop believing I mattered? Only by facing this pain can the ego begin to rebuild, not as a tyrant, but as a guide. One of Jung's most dangerous psychological dynamics is projection, the unconscious act of placing one's inner turmoil onto the outside world. The bitter old man becomes a master of this. He projects his failures onto the youth, his fears onto change, his regrets onto society. And in doing so, he transforms the world into a battlefield where only he understands the truth. This projection is not conscious. That's what makes it so dangerous. The old man doesn't know he's bitter. He thinks he's right. He thinks the world is what's broken. People have no values anymore, he'll say. Everything is fake now. These are not observations. They are reflections, his own decay mirrored in others. Projections are powerful because they absolve responsibility. Why look inward when you can blame the world? Why grieve your losses when you can call younger generations soft or delusional? But as Jung warned, every projection is a message from the unconscious, something we refuse to see in ourselves. In the bitter old man, these projections harden into ideology. He becomes a preacher of despair, a prophet of doom, and worst of all, he thinks he's helping. He believes his bitterness is clarity, when in truth, it is the fog that blinds him to his own shadow. The challenge then is not to silence the old man, but to help him see, to bring back the mirror and gently say, this rage is not about the world, it's about you. Memory can be a source of wisdom or a prison. Jung observed that unresolved experiences, especially painful ones, don't vanish with time. They sink. They gather in the unconscious, waiting. For the bitter old man, the past isn't a story of lessons. It's a chain of injustices he can't let go of. Many people age with grace, even humor. They reflect on the past with a sense of peace. But for those who carry unresolved grief, regret, or shame, aging feels like punishment. The past becomes louder, not quieter. Every mistake replays like a haunting echo. And the worst part, no one else hears it. This is the trap of the bitter old man. He doesn't live in the present. He lives in what should have been. He replays lost opportunities, failed relationships, betrayals, and instead of learning, he marinates in them. This isn't remembrance, it's rumination. Jung believed that time itself could be an initiatory force, but only if we are willing to confront it honestly. The bitter old man refuses. He turns his back on time and looks inward only to count his wounds. That's why he cannot offer wisdom, only warnings. But here lies the paradox. The same past that imprisons him could set him free. If only he dared to reinterpret it. If only he could see that he was not defeated, but tested. The story didn't end. It just never transformed. And that is the final tragedy of the bitter old man. Not that he remembers, but that he never rewrote the meaning. There is a prison more brutal than any with bars, one built from guilt, shame, and unspoken regret. Inside it lives the bitter old man, but not as a victim. He is both inmate and warden. Jung saw this clearly. The failure to confront our inner failures does not lead to peace. It leads to inner captivity. Many assume the bitter old man hates the world. In truth, he often hates himself. Every lost dream, every person he hurt, every time he betrayed his own values, these memories don't fade. They turn into internal judges, whispering accusations in the silence of old age. He cannot escape them. So he projects them outward, hoping the noise will drown out the echo within. This inability to forgive oneself is deeply tragic. It is not pride that keeps him from healing. It is fear. Fear that if he looks at his life too closely, he'll find he was never the man he wanted to be. So he builds a wall of bitterness, convinced it's protection. But inside, he's still haunted by the same question. What if I failed myself? Jung believed that the path to healing wasn't in pretending, but in confronting. Forgiveness of self is not about forgetting, it's about reclaiming the story. The bitter old man could become wise if only he realized that even in the twilight of life, it is still possible to begin again. The bitter old man doesn't always wear wrinkles. Sometimes he's in his 20s. His face is smooth, but his soul is ancient. He speaks like someone who's seen it all, when in truth, he's simply closed himself off too early. Jung warned us, archetypes are not about age. They are about energy, and the energy of bitterness can infect the young just as easily, especially those who've experienced betrayal, disillusionment, or emotional neglect early in life. Instead of healing, they harden. They adopt the posture of cynicism as a defense mechanism, mistaking it for maturity. You've seen them. Young people who laugh at hope, who mock joy, who scoff at dreams because they've been burned once. And now they burn everything they touch. These are not wise youth. They are prematurely old, spiritually tired, emotionally closed, and already echoing the voice of the bitter old man. This is why Jung insisted on individuation, the process of becoming whole. Without it, we inherit not only our family's trauma but society's bitterness. The archetype grows in us like rust on metal, slowly, quietly, until one day we wake up and realize we've built a life based on defense, not creation. The tragedy of the young old man is that he never got to be young. He skipped wonder, skipped innocence, skipped faith. But the journey isn't over. Archetypes can be confronted, and sometimes the younger you are, the more time you have to reclaim your true self. Silence is loud for the bitter old man. In solitude, there is no one to blame, no one to impress, only the echo of thoughts he's long tried to avoid. And it's here, in this mirror of solitude, that the truth becomes unbearable. Jung believed that confrontation with the self was one of the most sacred and terrifying experiences a human could endure. It strips away illusions, it demands accountability, and for the bitter old man, this moment often comes too late or never at all, because to face oneself fully is to admit, I chose bitterness over healing. Many fill their lives with distractions to avoid this reckoning. The bitter old man is no different. He clings to routines, rituals, grudges, anything that keeps the mirror fogged. But when life slows down and noise fades, the mirror clears, and he sees not a villain, but a boy who once had dreams, a man who once tried, a soul that still longs to be whole. This moment, though painful, is also sacred, because in that reflection lies the last chance for redemption. The bitter old man doesn't have to remain bitter. Solitude can be a tomb or a womb. It can bury him, or it can rebirth him. But he must choose, and that choice, often delayed for decades, might just be the most important one of his life. Not all mentors are wise. Some pass on pain instead of wisdom. Some teach not to elevate, but to control. This is where the bitter old man becomes most dangerous, not when he is silent, but when he speaks, when he becomes a teacher of hatred disguised as a messenger of hard truths. Jung warned of archetypes that masquerade as guides. The bitter old man often cloaks himself in authority. He says things like, I'm just telling it like it is, or you'll understand when you're older. But what he's really doing is transmitting his disillusionment, his fear, and his unresolved trauma to the next generation. We see this in families, workplaces, even political movements, charismatic yet bitter figures who attract followers not with vision, but with shared resentment. They don't offer solutions, they offer enemies. They define identity by what they hate, not by what they love. And in doing so, they create a cycle, wounded elders producing wounded disciples. The tragedy here is double. First, the old man never finds peace, and second, those who follow him never find freedom. Jung believed that a true elder empowers others to think, feel, and grow. The bitter old man infects rather than inspires. To break the cycle, we must recognize the false mentor. We must ask, is this person expanding my consciousness or narrowing it? Because every lesson rooted in bitterness leads not to truth, but to spiritual paralysis. It's not just individuals who become bitter, entire cultures can. In fact, Jung believed that when society avoids facing its collective shadow, it creates archetypes like the bitter old man on a mass scale. And today, we see signs of this everywhere. Media driven by outrage, nostalgia turned into weapon, and cynicism celebrated as intelligence. Modern society has mastered the art of disillusionment. Promises are broken early, trust is rare, identity is fragile, and in this chaos, bitterness thrives. It offers an identity, the one who sees through the lies. It feels empowering at first, like armor, but over time it becomes a cage. Social media has amplified this trend. Platforms reward negativity. The more outraged, the more attention. The more sarcastic, the more respected. And slowly, the collective voice of wisdom is drowned by voices of disdain. It's not just the elderly falling into the bitter old man archetype, it's the culture itself. This epidemic is subtle because it hides behind the mask of realism. But as Jung taught, true realism includes hope. True awareness includes compassion. Bitterness is not truth. It is unprocessed pain pretending to be insight. If society is to evolve, it must reclaim reverence for the genuine elder, not the bitter, but the wise. Not the one who shouts the loudest, but the one who listens the deepest. Art mirrors the unconscious, and in films and series, the bitter old man has become a recurring character, sometimes as a warning, sometimes as a mirror. Jung would argue that this repetition is no accident. It's the collective psyche speaking through storytelling, revealing what we refuse to face. Think of Walter White in Breaking Bad, a brilliant man overlooked who slowly morphs into a symbol of rage and control. Or Clint Eastwood's character in Gran Torino, gruff, racist, alone, and yet aching for redemption. These characters show us what happens when pain is never healed, when regret is buried under ego. Even in comedies, the archetype appears. Think of BoJack Horseman, an animated show where humor masks existential despair. BoJack is the bitter old man in a young man's body, a soul consumed by self-loathing, pushing away everyone who tries to love him. Why do we keep telling these stories? Because we know this archetype is real. We see him in others. We fear becoming him. And art, when honest, does not lie to us. It reveals the darkness, not to glorify it, but to name it. Because once named, the archetype loses power. Jung believed that by recognizing archetypes, we could integrate them consciously. Films and series that portray the bitter old man aren't just entertainment. They are mirrors, offering us a chance to ask, is this who I'm becoming? Is it possible for the bitter old man to be healed? Jung would say, yes, but only through a confrontation with the deepest layers of the self. Healing this archetype is not about pretending the bitterness never existed. It's about walking back through the ruins of one's own life with eyes open, heart exposed, and ego lowered. It's about transforming pain into power, not the kind that dominates others, but the kind that restores inner peace. This journey is rare because it is terrifying. It asks the old man to look back and feel what he spent decades avoiding: regret, grief, shame. The bitter old man often prides himself on having survived everything, but true healing asks, at what cost? If survival meant shutting down the soul, then what was preserved? Healing begins when the old man stops blaming the world and begins asking, where did I betray myself? That question is the key. It shifts the energy inward, not as self-punishment, but as self-responsibility. In Jungian terms, it's the start of individuation, the process of integrating all parts of the psyche, including the shadow. And then, slowly, something changes. The old man stops speaking in absolutes. He listens. He cries, not because he's weak, but because he's no longer numb. He apologizes. He reconnects with wonder. Sometimes he picks up a long-abandoned hobby, painting, gardening, music, and in those moments, the bitter mask begins to crack. Behind it, we see the wise man he was meant to become. This transformation is not just personal, it ripples outward. Families heal, generations shift. The old man who once spread bitterness now becomes a beacon of healing. He tells his story, not to lecture, but to liberate. He says things like, don't make the mistakes I made. But this time it's not control, it's confession. Jung saw the elder stage of life not as decline, but as a sacred phase of integration, a time to prepare for death, not with fear, but with completion. The healed, bitter old man becomes something beautiful, not perfect, but whole. And in that wholeness, there is peace. Every aging person stands at a crossroads. One path leads to wisdom, the other to cynicism. Both look similar at first. Both speak with experience. Both have endured much, but their essence couldn't be more different. Wisdom is expansive. It listens more than it speaks. It holds paradox, embraces uncertainty, and stays curious. Wisdom sees others, not as threats, but as fellow travelers. The wise old man is gentle because he knows power is not control, it's understanding. He smiles not because life spared him pain, but because he learned to dance with it. Cynicism, on the other hand, is constricted. It pretends to be intelligence, but it's actually fear wearing a mask. Cynicism sees weakness everywhere, mocks vulnerability, and dismisses beauty as naivete. The cynical old man believes he's seen it all, when in fact he stopped looking a long time ago. He's not seasoned, he's stuck. Jung warned of the danger of becoming old without becoming wise. He saw aging as a spiritual challenge. In youth, life is about expansion. In old age, it's about depth. If we don't go deeper, we go bitter. It's not aging that causes cynicism. It's the refusal to find meaning in what we've lived. And society often rewards the wrong path. The cynical are celebrated as realists. The wise are often ignored because they don't scream. But make no mistake, in every generation we need elders. Not bitter judges, but luminous guides. Not old men who rant, but old men who remember what love feels like. The road to wisdom is hard. It demands humility, reflection, sometimes therapy, sometimes tears. But it leads to something cynicism never will: legacy. The wise old man doesn't just leave behind knowledge, he leaves behind healing. Carl Jung never screamed, he didn't preach. He wrote quietly, profoundly, like someone whispering across time. And yet his warning about the bitter old man may be more urgent today than ever. Why? Because we are facing a global crisis of meaning, a society addicted to speed, conflict, distraction, a culture that fears aging, glorifies youth, and discards its elders. In such a world, the bitter old man doesn't just survive, he multiplies. He becomes the avatar of our collective refusal to confront pain. And it's not just individuals at risk. Institutions can become bitter, nations, entire generations. We see it in ideologies that blame instead of build, in leaders who weaponize nostalgia, in media that feeds outrage rather than insight. The bitter old man is no longer just a character, it's a cultural frequency. But Jung's work offers hope. It tells us that even the darkest archetypes have light at their core. The bitter old man is not a final form, he is a signal, a symbol, a call to transform what we've buried. His bitterness is a message. Something within us needs to be healed. So, we must listen. We must raise our elders, not as relics, but as mentors. We must teach our youth to value depth over sarcasm. We must restore storytelling, therapy, spirituality, not as luxuries, but as necessities. Because without these, the bitter old man wins. And if he wins, we lose something more than culture, we lose soul. Jung's legacy isn't just theory, it's a compass, and if we follow it, we might just grow old, not with bitterness, but with brilliance. As we draw this exploration to a close, having journeyed through the intricate layers of the bitter old man archetype, we find ourselves at a pivotal juncture. We've delved into the depths of human psychology, examined the shadows that can envelop the soul, and recognized the transformative power of confronting one's inner turmoil. Yet amidst this profound introspection, a beacon of hope emerges, a testament to the boundless love that transcends human understanding. In the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verse 16, we encounter a declaration that has resonated through the ages. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. This verse encapsulates the essence of divine love, a love so profound that it offers redemption and eternal life to all who believe. This divine love is not abstract. It is personal and intimate. It reaches into the darkest corners of our existence, offering light and hope. It speaks to the bitter old man within us, the part that harbors resentment, regret, and despair, and whispers a promise of renewal and transformation. Imagine standing at the crossroads of your life, burdened by past mistakes, haunted by missed opportunities, and feeling the weight of accumulated bitterness. In that moment, the message of John 3:16 becomes a lifeline, a reminder that no matter how far we've strayed, no matter how deep our wounds, there is a path back to wholeness. Accepting this love requires a leap of faith, a willingness to believe in something greater than ourselves. It calls us to embrace the gift of salvation offered through Jesus Christ, to acknowledge our need for grace, and to open our hearts to the possibility of a new beginning. This invitation is extended to everyone, regardless of background, past actions, or current circumstances. It's a universal call to experience the transformative power of divine love, to shed the bitterness that binds us, and to step into a life filled with purpose, peace, and joy. As we reflect on the themes discussed, let us consider the profound implications of embracing this love. It's not merely about personal salvation. It's about becoming vessels of love and compassion in a world that desperately needs healing. It's about breaking the cycle of bitterness and becoming agents of change, spreading hope and light wherever we go. If this message has touched your heart, I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on your own journey. Are there areas in your life where bitterness has taken root? Are there wounds that need healing? Know that you are not alone and that a path to restoration is available to you. I invite you to open your heart to the love of God, to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and to embark on a transformative journey toward healing and wholeness. This decision is personal and profound, marking the beginning of a new chapter in your life. If you're ready to take this step, I encourage you to reach out to a local faith community, speak with someone you trust, or spend time in prayer and reflection. Remember, the journey of faith is not one you have to walk alone. As we conclude, I want to express my gratitude for joining me on this exploration. If this content has resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Your support enables us to continue creating meaningful content that inspires and uplifts. Thank you for being a part of this journey. May you find peace, purpose, and the transformative power of divine love in your life.